Hello, everyone. I presume you are there. This is our first webinar for iSing magazine and our forthcoming articles. We presume you can hear us. Please do, if you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is an option to chat and to leave us a message or a question or anything you want to say regards to the webinar. So please do type us something, let us know you're there, say hi, anything, tell us what you had for dinner.
Get something nice. Being a Sunday,
yeah.
Roast.
So yeah, please leave us a message, let us know you're there. Hope you're all good. We have Rob. Rob, good day. Now this is where everyone feels like they're famous because we say their names out loud.
Say the next one.
Begins with D. D-E-Q-A. There we go, I said it. Decker, I think. But you can always send us a phonetic translation of that if you've got it. So yeah, here we are. We're gonna talk a little bit about warming up. First of all, don't be afraid to send us a question. It really doesn't matter what the question is. Doesn't matter if you feel stupid or whether you feel it's simple or not, because everyone's approach to warming up and singing is different. And actually, some of the wackiest things work for some people and not for others. So we'd love to know your thoughts about how you feel about warming up, what you do with your voices, whether you'd heard about some stuff that you're not sure of, or maybe you just want some advice.
That's it. Can I just add there that this is where this gets good, because everyone knows the basic reasons behind warming up and why we have to do it, and we can talk about that all day. But the point is that everyone's got a different circumstance and comes with a different experience, and that is where it gets tricky, and that's where we have to start using different strategies and those kind of things. That's really exciting for us to think about, isn't it? If we can have some of those in, so we can maybe give you some ideas of how to get around your situation and work out a warm-up for you.
Cool, that's it. And just breaking news there, it's pronounced Dacre. So thanks for that. Thanks for sending that through. So we would like to recap the article a little bit and talk about some bits and pieces in there that it'd be good to reiterate, and if there's any questions that come up around that would be really, really awesome. So why, Steve, do we even warm up?
Well, very briefly, because again, I think this is a bit of a no-brainer. If we think about athletes, if we think about anything where we have to have physical exertion in life, to get things moving is always a good start. And I think with singing, I think the reason why so many people skip it is because singing is something that we can kind of do anyway. You can kind of just blag and get away with.
Well, you can talk from the moment you get out of bed. So some people feel that that's as good as singing. I've got a voice, here it is, let's just start using it.
Exactly that. And to be honest, I mean, there'll be some people out there that will be nodding their head going, yeah, I can. I can get away with that warming up. But the thing is it optimal? And this is, I think, what we're talking about here today. Is it optimal for your situation and your circumstance? Like somebody who just wants to have a laugh, being somebody that hurdles, they can go down to the park and just crack some out and get away with that, I'm sure. But if they are in the Olympic Games, then their approach is going to be a little bit different, and that's what we need to think about here.
I would like to say that the last time I tried to sprint cold, I did pull my groin. So, in case you guys want to know that, but what that means is, it means that injury is more likely if you don't warm up. And I certainly, what you said earlier just now, Steve, was some people feel like they can just spring out of bed and sing. And actually, there's been mornings where I felt like that, because there must be some contributing factor to the fact that maybe that day or the previous day didn't have much stress on my voice, my hydration was really good, maybe actually my vocal mechanism and all the things that piece it together were just sat in the right place, and suddenly singing becomes just that little bit easier off the bat. And so I'm quite tempted on those days to not bother warming up, just go straight to the kitchen and belt out some Whitney whilst doing the eggs. But I always
standard.
But I must remind myself every time that actually I really do believe this as well, is that the longevity in singing, being able to continue that day after day, and especially if your schedule gets busy, warming up even when you feel that you're already there is only going to benefit you. It's just going to keep you in such a good place, keep your muscles supple, avoid any damage that you might do yourself from cold muscles, anything like that. And actually sometimes warm up, especially if you do several gigs in a row, can offset the day before it. If you've sang the night before, sometimes I certainly feel that I need to warm up just that little bit more, because maybe I'm just a little bit ragged or tired or stiff from a heavy night the previous on stage.
Absolutely. And added to that, I mean, you just discussed there that sometimes, make things easier, and sometimes you may not even feel like you need to warm up. But the point is, what's wrong with being brilliant? But really, why do we do this? Why do we sing? We do it for the love, and we do it we do it for life. We do it for fulfillment in life. And so if we can do everything we can do to become the best we can be every time we step out on stage, let's do it. And I think warming up is definitely one of those things.
Yeah, it's part of the preparation of being ready to sing anyway. And we all know that being prepared is the key to a lot of things. So that's why we want to warm up. That's like us banging on about why you should. But let's talk about what to do. So, what are the key exercises that spring to mind?
For me, initially, it's about, especially, and this might work for teachers as well. This might be any teachers out there that are watching this. It's about finding the ease first. Obviously, two things. If we're somebody that really knows our voice and has got a great understanding, and we haven't got much time, then we're going to want to find the most efficient warm-up for us immediately and get into that. But as a general overview, if we're trying to find our way through a warm-up, I would say that the finding ease is the best thing to do first, and that starts from the bottom to the top of the range, and any sounds that are going to promote that ease.
Mm-hmm. And we're looking for as little strain as possible, right? That's kind of it. It's got to be as free as it can be right off the bat.
Two things. We want to expand that so that we can work into that in song, which we the thing we're just about to go ahead and do. But secondly, is to get an idea of, wow, okay, maybe today I'm a little bit puffy. And for me personally, that ends up being in the second bridge, and when things are supposed to start, kind of thinning out, and even dropping down into the first. To be honest, when things are really starting to get a bit thin, and if it's on a day when I'm puffy, I'm going to feel it. And so if at least I know before I go into song that that's the situation. And,
yeah, the warm up can be a bit of a diagnostic at times. You can go up there and go, so this is not like it was yesterday.
Right. So
it gives you a chance to solve it,
And so the sounds that can really work into that are, first up, E. I would say using the vowel E, the bottom of the range to the top. If you have some scales, and we've probably mentioned this a million times before, if you've got scales, you use them. If you haven't, don't cry about it. It's not good. It's not at the end of the world. You can just up and down, kind of siren-like, kind of. Just finding your way. And if it's one of those days when I'm a bit puffy, I'm gonna. That's how I know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And spending about 1 or 2 minutes doing those particular sirens is really good. You can change the vowels to oo. Sometimes you can open them up to or or o, but there's a whole bunch of things. Again, what we said before is whatever feels really free and comfortable initially is really what we're going for. So E and oo are just suggestions, really.
Can you demonstrate an oo?
I can. Ooh. There we go.
So they're two sounds. If we move into the realms of scales, again, as Chris, you just said, there's so many things we could talk about here, but just from experience, I would say that, especially guys as well, who kind of end up getting a bit thick and a bit heavy, starting at the top and working down as a warm-up to find this ease. But the two sounds we just talked about is a great way to start, and again, without scales. to find that top first, which is normally something that we find difficult.
Yeah, and maybe for some common in females, starting from the bottom is good because the bottom is too light or too soft, and sometimes we need a bit of traction in there before we start, and that is, like I said, often more applicable to female singers. So yeah, you can change the direction as you see fit. But I mean, if you guys want to chip in, if you have a particular warm-up exercise that you feel gets right to the crux of it quickly and you feel works effectively for us, then feel free to type it out. Maybe we can chat about it. But yeah, look, you can check out the article for more information on what warms us up. But we're talking about what gets us into the place ready to sing, and that can begin with just getting blood flow to the muscles and getting them kind of stretched and coordinated through the different registers, and that's what Ianu is beginning to do, along with the lip trills and such. They're getting blood flow ready, but I certainly feel, from my point of view and many other singers that I've spoken to in the past, that the warm-up kind of needs to go a little further than that, especially if you're going to do a particular activity. So if the activity is busting it out on stage, especially for a whole night on a function, then that's why we looked at the stage ready part of the warm-up, which is going into things that are more sustained with more vibrato, the intensity that might mimic your singing a little more, so there's a bit more volume. Some of the vowels might be more spread and open because that's what we're going to have to do in song. And we might, instead of going across the entire range, we might start to focus on particular areas or notes that are going to need to be relaxed out before you get on stage. So that's where we looked at the sustains, repeat and sustain. So things like ma 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 ma, or whatever works. We're looking at vowel changes. No 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 nay na 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 na, and working on semitones through around what you feel is going to be tricky and going to need to be relaxed out. So with that strategy is to start on a vowel that works really well, and you can work with a voice teacher, or you might know that already, and then progress from that vowel and start opening it up onto some others as you feel comfortable. What would you add to that?
Well, I'll just say, to verify that point, think about it yourselves. I've heard it a million times, and it's right. I've sung 2 gigs already this weekend, and I feel warmed up when I enter the third. I feel like my voice is better after singing 2 gigs, and that just verifies your point there about getting into the more repeats, the sustains, and mimicking what we're doing in song, because the voice will just respond to that, and equally creating the pathways for sustaining in songs and things that are just about to come up.
Absolutely. So we do actually have a question that we got through prior to the webinar beginning, and I'm going to read it out. This was a chap. His name is Rob, and what he says is Rob is on the call, I think. Let me just check. Rob, yes, Rob is there. So Rob, thank you for sending this in. This is brilliant. I sing in a barbershop chorus in London. Warm-ups are led by the musical director, which are great, but don't often go higher than a middle C. As much as I love lip trills, I don't think the guys always do them effectively. So my question is, are there some easier exercises to open up the higher range that won't lead to a breathy sound or a raised larynx as we sing up through the range? So that is a really great question, Rob. Thank you so much. I understand why your musical director might not get above that note, because maybe some of the harmony lines don't go too far past that, being your male choir. So that's kind of understandable. But yeah, for you guys, even to sing down in the lower ranges, I really feel that there's a lot of benefit in exercising the whole range, so that there is, the tone can end up sounding a bit more rounded and a bit more expressive if you've got your whole voice under control and not just the chest voice under middle C. So do you have any thoughts about that?
I do have some thoughts about this, yeah. This is a cracking question, Rob, because in the experience I've had with group singing in the past, teaching groups to sing or to exercise is probably one of the hardest things you can do as a teacher. As you've kind of pointed out here, you can't hear what everyone's doing, and throwing out certain exercises may work for one. Try to do a little properly, but we talked about the ease and the ooze just a second ago. The things, what I left, you said about not going fluffy at the top and going light, the things like ease and ooze are likely to do that if people are getting up there first, it goes into that kind of thing. So that is likely to happen to begin with. If you can, which I have done in the past, and have always kind of thrown it out there as a bit of a kind of, be careful with this. Go into some of the things that are going to add more core closure, that are going to get rid of that breathiness. But say, if you're going to squeeze on this, jump out. Like, we can't fix everyone at the same time. But using things like nay, 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 or a hung sound, H-U-N-G, and holding on to the N-G at the end, and working up in a siren type way, like the hung. Those kind of things, you're going to get some people that may and that's the times when you need to go, guys, back out. But if there's some people getting the next step, which is more core closure on from the ease, then for me that's a good thing. And
yeah,
I think that'll answer your question.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd like to add that one of the greatest exercises ever is the straw. And when people use siren through a straw, or even through some really closed lips, or in the article we talk about voiced fricatives, they are also quite effective in bringing better chord closure to the vocal cords, while still maintaining quite a low intensity warm up. That it helps to massage them, set them in the right place. Everything starts to move a little bit easier under they're called semi-occluded exercises. So yeah, like we said, I think that might really help some of your people to get the right effect. But
get some cocktails.
Yeah, try some of those. And again, because you're men, I think what Steve said earlier was coming down from the top with a kind of dopey tone through an occluded exercise is going to help you to open that upper range and keep the larynx low too. So I hope that helps, Rob. Feel free to let us know if it doesn't. We've got a couple of other things that we can look at.
There's a question from Kiriaki.
Kiriaki, okay. I bought a program about singing and I started using it, and when I first did the larynx exercises, it was easier than ever for me to use Vocal Fry. And I think it sounded good when I used it in singing, presumably for style. But then the weather is colder these days, and I feel it too difficult to do the Vocal Fry. Do you think it's because of the cold? I think I might be slightly cold, or have a cold, or did I just strain my voice? What may I do? Okay, that's kind of a tricky one, but if the weather kind of correlates to the way that you're feeling with Vocal Fry can sometimes be hard to achieve if you're a bit rough and a bit ragged, or sometimes if maybe the vocal cords aren't coming together quite well enough for some reason. Could be a cold, could be allergies or anything like that. And sometimes problems with technique can mean that people find it quite hard to get that going on. And also cold temperature reduces blood flow to the larynx. So there's quite a few reasons why that might not be working so well, but I think the overuse of Vocal Fry, Vocal Fry itself is quite an inefficient way of singing, and people that tend to speak in Fry like that tend to have quite problematic voices because it's really inefficient. So maybe the fact that you might use it a little too much or a little too often might leave you feeling a little bit ropey after it. So that's something that I would look out for. What would you have to say about that?
I would totally add to that.
Concur.
That's the word I'm looking for. Because it's hard to know without hearing you, Kyriaki, in the sense that the vocal fry, as you say, it can be perceived in so many different ways. All of these sounds can be perceived in so many different ways, and then reinterpreted in so many different ways. So yeah, it might be that over the time of you doing it, might have overdone it a tiny bit, and you might have created some muscle memory there that is being hard to shift. So we would love to. I mean, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear what's going on in there to really hear what's going on and see if it can help you out. But as Chris said, maybe give it a rest to begin with, and then see if you can jump back in. And if you get immediate problems again, then maybe it is the actual exercise that's giving you the problems.
Yeah, and there is some sort of ratification for that. That in the USA it is quite fashionable for females to be using vocal fry in music and speech. So and that has shown that it causes some damage in those singers. So it is something to be kind of careful of if you're going to be using it quite a lot. Every vocal quality, by the way, is completely acceptable in the right amount. It's all about expression, but some cost you more than others, and that could be one. But again, we're speculating as we don't really know without hearing you. So I hope that is helpful. We'll also like to just cover a little bit before we have to quit it. But get your questions in quick, by the way, if you want them before it closes. But yeah, we also mentioned in the article about warming up when you're not 100%, which is, I don't know, what is not 100%. It could be post night before. You might be ill. You might be hungover. You might be all sung out from the day before. There are many reasons as to why you might not be 100%, and sometimes the warm-up needs to just take a little bit of a steadier curve. So where Steve was talking about earlier, keeping the intensity low to begin with, you kind of need to dip your feet in the water. Some of the occluded exercises help to massage the vocal cords so that you can hope to press out some inflammation that might be there, or press out some lactic acid that builds up in the muscle. That is also helpful, and you might find actually with a more prolonged but steady warm-up that you can get past that little something that seems to be slowing you down that day. What would you say about that?
I'd say that the approach to the warm-up when under the weather, I'm going to assume that we're talking about some puffiness, that kind of thing at cord level. It just needs to be exaggerated sometimes, in the sense that if you're somebody that in normal singing the larynx wants to jump, then it's going to do that. I find from experience that it's more likely to do that when things are puffy, right? Because you're going to want to like work around like
things
pitches.
Don't feel too great, so you
exactly. So I would suggest keeping the larynx down a lot more when doing, for example, the lip bubble would normally kick off with to kind of keep it down a lot more to begin with, get the body reminding the body that that's kind of needs to stay down a little bit more than usual. So that might be an approach for somebody that is puffy and normally wants to pull or squeeze into their first bridge and above.
Yeah, and you know what? Listening out for some people, if you're ever warming up your voice, ready for something, and you hear a kind of chirpy kind of nay, nay, nay sort of thing going on, if you're in the middle of the bridge or anywhere really, it's quite often that's going to be a sign of true inflammation. Like things are a bit rougher than you realise. And so wherever possible, that might be an opportunity to actually stop singing and rest at that point. So, the warm-up will help you to see that. Now, if you're preparing for a gig, like we're going to do in a minute, that's exactly where we are. We're in a hotel room in the middle of nowhere about to go on stage with a whole bunch of straws that I stole from a cocktail bar. So that's our situation. But so if you're sat here and you discover nay, 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 it's all started going like that, the option probably isn't to go, hey guys, I can't do the gig. I appreciate that is not the option, but if you're at home or you're just thinking about doing a rehearsal or something like that and you hear a sound like that, maybe that is time to step back from the warm-up and say, actually, I'm not 100%. Going ahead with this would probably create more swelling or more problems in the long run. And then take a break. look after your voice when it comes to things like anti-inflammatories. That can often help the warm-up. If you're physically in a better place, the warm-up will be a lot easier. And when we're talking about physically, we're talking sleep, hydration, stress levels, all that kind of stuff. What else do you think really contributes to that?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, there are so many things. We're talking about optimal health again, aren't we? I mean, we need to curb our what's the word? Like the fact that we're just so obsessive over the health and all that kind of stuff. Because people are gonna get bored with us. I think that's
starting with you guys, right? Yeah. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah. So basically, eat well, sleep, drink water, but not the tap water because that's a fluoride in it, and that doesn't help you out. You
and not too cold.
Filter that stuff. Anything else that we can be really picky about?
I don't know, really. Paint fumes, humidity. Again, helping the warm-up process. It's quite often some singers, especially if they're really high end. Which I hear about opera singers doing this a lot. Is keeping the humidity kind of high where they are, so that their voice is always ready to go. That can involve putting a bowl of water on a radiator or getting a humidifier in the room. Things like dry air, like aircon, can really screw up a warm-up. A flight, get off a flight and start singing. I mean, it's just horrible. So a lot of things can hinder your warm-up. So you might have to consider what you put in, or your environment, before you can consider actually how effectively you're going to be warm up. Judy has sent us a message. Is it still as effective if you warm up a couple of hours before a gig, or would you recommend as near to the performance as possible? Now, you know what, I think that's a really great question, and I have thoughts about some of that. What are you thinking?
Another depends. Some people are going to work better. Some people are going to work better getting up in the morning and have a run out before, and then leaving it for the gig, and then doing a tiny bit before the gig. It's just going to start, creating those pathways again and getting you in the right place for the gig. Some people may not, and equally, as you just put there, Jill, you kind of answered the question yourself there. You could warm up 2 to 3 hours before, and then have a break, and you may work wonders on that. So I would say it's one of those kind of feel it yourself and see how it goes.
Yeah, but I think it is good occasionally to do the early warm-up, because it gives you a chance to see what's not working as well that day. It does give you a head start on what you might need to focus on. So yeah, I'm a real fan of testing it out in the morning or in the afternoon, and then working on it. Or if it's all hunky-dory, then I'm just back on the straw. Sure. 5 minutes before the gig, ready to just get that blood flow in there again, and a few maybe open valves to make sure I'm still tuned in.
Yeah, just on that point, just another kind of anecdotal thing in terms of how much before and all that kind of thing. You just said you would just get on the straw before the gig. If I'm completely honest, I'm sometimes during the gig that I'll be throwing a straw in the mouth. Yeah. Like, if I can get away with it, let's face it, some gigs we can do that. But just because,
the ones that are in casinos where no one cares.
but I tell you, it just gets me back into that place, back on that line. So that really does show that doing that close to the performance really does work for me anyway. So
yeah, and in between sets, yeah, Steve's totally right. It really helps. But we have one more question left, which is from Dacre. So thank you so much for sending that in. One of the main problems I have with my singing is that my vocals tend to get very rough and scratchy due to nerves during a performance, no matter how much I've warmed up before. So any tips? So what I'd love to know, Dacre, if you can hear this in time and send us a quick message, does that mean that when you're not nervous, your voice is not scratchy and it sounds different? So we're talking from the stage to maybe, the bathroom. Are you getting a different experience entirely? Because if you're not, that could mean something else. That could mean maybe the state of the vocal cords, or just a technical problem that lies in you, whether you're nervous or not. So if you can send us that through quickly. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say let's assume for the second that it's when you go on stage, things are fine before in warm up and actually outside of performance, but you find that it's actually being on stage that screws you up. There's two things here. First thing is that the maybe, which I've experienced in the past, we could be doing things different on stage. The same song, the same notes, but on stage, volume can increase, all that kind of stuff, and it would just throw out our balance that we normally have in the shower because we're in a completely different environment. So I would say that's definitely one point to consider, that could be the case. And secondly, as you just touched upon, if everything's kind of working out the same, you may not even get to trying to approach a song the same way as you do in the shower because of the nerves. We know that nerves affect us so much and can take over our entire body. We're dealing with an entirely different monkey on stage than we are in the shower. And so with that in mind, you could be doing everything. You could be doing everything right, but it's just these nerves are just getting in there. And that's something that we can help with, but we need a different approach to that.
Yeah, and a whole new article I would have thought, but yeah, the nerves can really change the way that the vocal cords and the musculature around the larynx actually functions. The effect of fight or flight can leave tension in there. Again, like Steve said, the volume thing, sometimes I get nervous because I think, oh my God, the on-stage sound is horrible, and I can't hear myself. You start pushing. Then your voice degrades over a couple of songs, and when you feel your voice go downhill, the first thing you think is, I'm nervous, because it's not going as well as it does when you can hear yourself perfectly at home. So yeah, Dacre says, it sounds great that morning, then a couple minutes before getting on stage, you just seem to lose it, and that, believers, that is often that's often the way it works. Depends on how many times you've been on stage. We're talking about stage nerves here, not necessarily warm-up. So I think if you do a really appropriate warm-up every time, but you still experience this, then it will be working on ways of increasing your confidence, dealing with nerves, if you're prepared in all other places. And if you've had that dryness that overcomes your entire mouth, once you step on stage and you're nervous, that goes right down to the vocal cords and it's suddenly croaky. So that's a tough one, Dacre.
Yeah, the dryness. One other thing, hopefully this would help. One thing I found is that as soon as we get nervous, the tongue and jaw will want to lock immediately, and we know that those two controllers are like some of the biggest players.
Big ones for singing.
Yeah. So if you can, as a bit of an action or a bit of a kind of helper, when you go on stage, maybe consider that, especially for the first few times. You don't really thinking about that when you're singing a song in the future, but to begin with, if it helps to go out there and go, do you know what? My mission is to get my tongue relaxed and my jaw relaxed. Everything else might fall around that, but I do know that is one of the first things that will go, and that will be one of the first things that will screw up the vocal
awesome
balance.
Yeah, so you can concentrate on the way that your mouth is shaped initially to make sure you're creating the right space. That's great advice. So we are out of time for this webinar. Before you guys go, I'd just like to really thank you all for attending, for firing in your questions, because they've been really awesome. They've provided some real meat to you guys, and I'm sure some of the other people on the call would have experienced or sympathized with the way that you guys approach your voices like that. So again, we hope we all see you again in future. Dacre, I will pronounce your name correctly next time. Yeah, we'd like to also thank iSing Magazine for putting on this webinar and inviting us to help you guys out. So there'll be another issue of iSing out at the end of May, which will have another article from us, which is around the professional voice and vocal stamina. But you can find iSing on Facebook. It's iSing Mag, facebook.com/iSing Mag. And also you can find us, we do host a podcast, which is every 2 weeks. And you can find us at thenakedvocalist.com, or indeed on Facebook at facebook.com/TNV questions, or you could just search The Naked Vocalist and we will come up. But yeah, that's it from us.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.
Be brilliant.